It's Dave and Darren here for Two Old Bloggers. Have we got a show for you today? We're talking about the latest happenings in Vikings world, which means a whole bunch of rumors because not much else has happened. But we do have those rumors, and we'll see what's going to happen. Then we dive into what will Kevin O'Connell, what will his scheme look like when it comes to tempo? Tempo is an important thing. And we'll go back in history a little bit and look at some of the teams that use different tempo playing to affect the game and win. Then we follow up with our second to last position group roundup. And this one is probably the most important of all, the quarterbacks. And of course, we've got some issues at quarterback and some revolving rumors around such. So let's get started. Hello, everybody. It's Saturday. Legal tampering period starts Monday. And of course, that's an hour closer because we go into daylight savings time this weekend. Yay. Alex, the reason that is a long intro is it gives time for people to gather and come from the moment we post the tweet. Everybody has a chance to hop on and get their notifications from YouTube and Facebook and everywhere else. That's why we do it. Now, on to the show. First off, Darren, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Dave. It looks like we got like 3 people from Alberta
Woohoo!
on the line already. So, hey. Happy to see some fellow Canucks joining us to talk Vikings football. Always nice. They probably know a hell of a lot more about the Vikings than I do. We'll see.
We will.
One of them wants us to get Tyler Huntley as their QB, who I like, actually. I like Tyler Huntley.
Do you?
But
okay.
I do. I don't know if I like him enough to be our starter, but I like him.
Joseph, fellow Canadian. All right. let's start. Today we are going to start what's happened over this last week. Have the
Or
Vikings
not happened, really.
or not happened? You know, the whole idea of the thumbnail to this is done anything yet? And the Vikings sure seem to not have done a whole lot. So, but we'll get into that. And what we're talking about is free agency and getting the Vikings ducks in a row so that they can get under, be cap compliant by Wednesday at 4 o'clock Eastern. And they're going to need some money because hopefully they're going free agent shopping. You know, the legal tampering period starts at noon on Monday. We'll see from there. Have no idea. But there are a couple things that have happened. Well, one that has happened this last week. Your Minnesota Vikings have re-signed this guy, T.Y. McGill. He is a
huge
defensive tackle. Yes, I know. It's amazing. They signed him for just barely over $1 million, but none of it's guaranteed. If you look, and that's hard to see unless you're watching us on a big screen TV, which may be scary, but there's his chart. All those, he came in the league in 2015. He's bounced from team to team to team to team to team on the practice squad, basically. And he was on our practice squad last year for a few moments in time. And some of the new people on defense know this guy and wanted him to be there, so they signed him. It's not going to do anything. I don't expect him to do anything. Don't look for him to become suddenly a super stud on the defensive line. But it was something.
A very little something for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't think I was kind of thinking about, and I was wondering, last night I was kind of feeling a bit, I don't know if concerned might be a little bit too strong, but I'm like a lot of people on here are already saying, like, when are the Vikings going to do something? Because they have a lot of work to do to get under the cap, even with the cap going up. And maybe, David, you can explain, I think you know this better than me, kind of explain how that works. Like with the cap going up, how that impacts the Vikings. If the Vikings have to be cap compliant on Wednesday, even with the cap going up.
Well, and the cap going up, with the cap going up, we're a little around 16 million over. They've got to get under that by Wednesday at 4 o'clock. So that means they've got to either get rid of players. You've seen some teams around the league that have already released players. They have to renegotiate contracts. They've got to free it up some way. You could do some cap tricks with renegotiations and turning money into bonuses and spreading that bonus payment. You know, the player gets it now, but the team has to pay it out in the future, spread out. There's ways to do that, and it'll probably be a combination of all of those. But the question is who, and the big figure around us is our quarterback, Kirk Cousins, who has a $45 million cap hit. Now, before we get into Kirk Cousins, Raymond, you and me both are watching Twitter by the moment. Before we get into that real quick, on today's Purple Daily, and they've been hot and bothered, ready to go live if something happens, Kirk has all the leverage. Time to change. We'll see. But Purple Daily this morning, Judd and Phil Mackey were talking about the tweet from this kid, Justin Cohen. I haven't a clue who Justin Cohen is. He's got a great handle, Bad Boys of Scoops. He writes about all sorts of stuff. He says, speaking with a member of the front office, I don't know if he did or not. I don't know who he is. Vikings are about to blow things up. That's interesting if that is indeed the case. Yes, we need money to sign draft picks as well. You're correct, Brian. They've got to get, it's usually around $5 million-ish under.
Yeah.
And you figure $10 million under the cap just for the padding. And that's not signing any new free agents, and we know they have to do that because there's no way to fill all the holes via the draft.
Yeah, Dave, I don't know if you're wanting to talk about this tweet. I was going to dive into like what we haven't done in so far as getting rid of players, but carry on with Doogie's tweet here.
We'll get there. Today at 1:20 p.m. Central Time, Doogie puts out this tweet about Aaron plugged into the Texans. Aaron Wilson, our own Tyler Forness, met him down at the Senior Bowl. He is a reporter. He is a blue check type, or even though he doesn't have it, he is involved in the business. And if he says that, and he's down there for the Texans, if he says Deshaun Watson trade market expanding rapidly, yes, due to the no findings verdict by the grand jury. And all that means, for those that don't know the legal process, is that there wasn't enough evidence presented for indictment and likely prosecution. And the prosecutor could have brought more evidence if he had it or didn't. It gets real hard, and he said, she said type cases, and he was basically relieved of any criminal responsibility. He still has the civil court, which has a much lower standard of evidence, but we'll see what happens. Well, that basically means
there's also the NFL, Dave, who we're not sure what their standard is, but it's quite likely they'll suspend Watson for some period of time.
Well, it depends
for the not the code of conduct, the NFL code of conduct,
right? But the big deal is they may wait, because the NFL doesn't like doing anything until they absolutely have to. They may wait for the civil trials to play out and then do it after that. So if they do wait and say the civil trials come up with he wins, it doesn't, it really doesn't sound like it. When you get 22 women that are accusing him of basically the same thing, it doesn't sound like it, like that there is enough evidence there. But if he does, they really can't punish him because there was nothing found. They're punishing him for what? Being accused. That's it. An accusation is not guilt. Sorry that people think that way sometimes, but it's not. Somebody accuses you of doing something and you didn't do it. That doesn't mean you're guilty of doing it. That means there's just an accusation out there. You shouldn't be punished just for an accusation. So we should see if the Vikings are interested, like supposedly said, or at least called and inquired, which is a good thing. I would hope they do. It's going to be easy because Watson, the football player, is good. I think he's a top 5 quarterback. He is a franchise quarterback. Watson, the human being, may not be so good, may be worse than not so good. And the question is, would he be worth it on your football team? If he's going to win you tons of football games, get you in the playoffs and make you competitive, does winning solve everything? Does the new regime want to go that route? It's a good question. I literally don't know.
What I read today, Dave, was that just one thing is that the Panthers are going to go hard after Watson. They wanted him last year, and then when the legal issues cropped up, they backed away, and then they went after Darnold, who they also still have to keep at a pretty substantial salary cap hit for what Darnold gives you next year. But that's what I read. They've done a lot of due diligence on Watson, so they're comfortable with the kind of person he is. Personally, I would not be comfortable with him if a guy has had 22 allegations made. I don't know. maybe he wasn't found guilty, but does that mean that the behavior goes away? It's something you'd really, really have to look into.
Right.
And I'm sure that the Vikings would, because you don't want to trade a guy and then there's no questioning Deshaun Watson's talent. You talked about it, top 5, top 10 quarterback in anybody's books. But if of course, the most important ability is availability, and if you aren't available to play, you don't do any team much good. So, a lot of concerns with Watson, and he's going to command a pretty. The Texans are going to be not looking to give him away either, so he'll take quite a price. But it adds to the quarterback intrigue in the NFL, and it also impacts the market value of our current quarterback, number 1 quarterback, Kirk Cousins, I think, and what we could get for him if we're looking to trade him. So a lot of stuff going on for the Vikings behind the scenes in particular. Not a lot of stuff has happened, as we mentioned, so far with the Vikings. They got some work to do to get under the cap hit. I think the fact that we haven't seen them do anything other than the huge T.Y. Hilton,
T.Y.
Hilton,
McGill.
T.Y. Hilton, T.Y. McGill signing is that I think that kind of speaks to the complexity of the Vikings situation and who they would be getting rid of or trying to trade. We've looked at there was the tweet that went out, or there was social media posts that talked about the Vikings were open to trading all of their high-priced veterans. Well, all of those high-priced veterans have some issues with them. Thielen, over 30, been nicked up, high salary cap hit this year. What are you going to get for him? The Browns just got look like they're getting Amari Cooper, and all they gave up for a guy who's 27 years old and probably younger and a little bit better than Thielen, they traded a 5th rounder and they swapped 6 rounders. So if you were thinking you were getting a 3rd rounder or something for Thielen, well, that ain't happening now if you're trading him. I don't know. If you look at Thielen's injury history lately and his age, you might get only a 6th or a 7th for him. Do the Vikings want to do that? Danielle Hunter in his prime, but he's basically barely played the past 2 years. Opposing years who are interested in him are going to look at that and use that as leverage when they approach the Vikings for a trade, if they have. And there was rumors that the Bills offered a 3rd and a 5th for Hunter this year. That was something Drew Bunting, who was watching here, mentioned earlier in the week. I'm not trading Danielle Hunter for a 3rd and a 5th, but apparently that's what the Bills offered, and maybe that's the best that the Vikings are getting. Again, is Kwesi Adofo-Mensah want to do that? I don't think so. Dalvin Cook, he's in his prime, but running backs aren't really valued that highly as they once were anymore. Kind of a haul are you going to get for him? Eric Kendricks, Harrison Smith, 2 guys who are 30 and over. Again, and hold high salary cap hits. Do teams want to give up a whole lot for players who are at that age, usually in their decline, and aren't cheap? Right. So, and then there's Cousins, which we will talk to later. So I think Kwesi Adofo-Mensah does not want to start his regime. Yeah, he's got to get the Vikings under the saddle, get them cap compliant. Yes, he wants to. I think they want to move some guys and blow things up, but you don't want to be giving guys away at 25 cents on the dollar either. And I think that's the issue right now. Is I think he and the Vikings front office are trying to get the best deals they can, and it's taking a while, and that's okay, because you don't want the Vikings to trade a 4th rounder for somebody like Herndon, who gets you 4 catches for like 25 yards and a touchdown. That's not what you want to do. We got to get rid of cap space. Yes. We do have some trade pieces, but let's get the best we can get for them. And I think that is really what Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is wrestling with now. And but we are going to see, I think, some big shit go down in the next 3 or 4 days with the Vikings. And we have to be prepared that some of us are not maybe going to be not all that happy with what they have done. But long term, I think I'm confident that it will end up being to the betterment for the Vikings.
I do too. Now, to continue with what's happened so far, there have been phone calls to Kirk Cousins. I've heard the immediate asking price from Kwesi was 2 first rounders. All right, some teams don't have those, i.e. the Colts. I hear talks with the Colts are ongoing, but they obviously don't have a first rounder this year. Can they negotiate from there? Sure. Are they real? Don't know. I mean, it all depends if Kirk Cousins, and we know Kirk Cousins is all about Kirk Cousins and getting paid. Uh, I've also heard the Vikings offered him an extension. He turned it down, and the extension was uh, well worth a large pay raise and some void years to get the cap numbers down. He supposedly, his rep turned it down. So I think the front office is a little perturbed over that. They might go to look elsewhere. And if you have teams like the Colts calling, that two first rounds is a starting point. Don't get all hyperventilated over, oh my God, nobody's going to give us two first rounds for him. It's a starting point, and we can hopefully meet in the middle. No matter what, we can trade Kirk Cousins, whether he likes it or not. Now, whether he signs an extension at Team B, right, that trades for him, that's a different story. He's got the leverage then and say, no, I'm just playing out this year, and then I'll hit the market. Well, if he does that, that lowers the amount of return we get for trading him, most likely, because he could say, hey, Colts, we'll take him. And he goes, well, I'm only playing for the year. And then the Colts go, well, there goes your two firsts. I'm going to give you a second and a first, a third and a first, or whatever it is. A first next year, to pay for him. And the cost comes down. Or the Vikings go, how about if we pay half his salary this year? Then we're buying that draft choice or putting a down payment on it that we would get. Both those work. We shall see what happens. There were a couple other rumors for players coming to Minnesota this week, or that they're targeting. Do you remember what I said to you?
Well, I remember one for sure, and that was Akeem Hicks.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody's watched this show over the past year or so, and every time we play the Bears, they know that I think Akeem Hicks is probably the Vikings' offensive line's worst nightmare, because that guy completely annihilates our interior every time he plays us. I love him. I think he's a great player. But again, the same with the Vikings players that we talked about that the Vikings need to get rid of. The Bears, who are blowing things up over there, they got rid of Eddie Goldman this week too. Another guy I wouldn't mind the Vikings taking a look at, actually, but and he'd be cheaper than Hicks. But really, Hicks is a guy, he's been missing games quite regularly the past 2-3 years, over 30 as well, and probably still has the reputation and the play when he's healthy that he's going to command a salary that's still quite significant. And I don't know if we'll see if the Vikings can pay it. But I love Akeem Hicks. I think he's one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL. And if you add him in the new 3-4 defense, I think that's a great starting point for the Vikings offseason plan. I just don't know, again, if the Vikings are going to consider the rewards are worth the risk as far as what they would pay him. Now, he's probably going to get like a 2 or 3 year deal, and right. most of it'll be funny money that he'll never get, no matter where he goes. But if you're asking me if I'd love to see Akeem Hicks as a Viking, just the fact we wouldn't have to play him 2 times a year is enough for me to want to re-sign that bastard, because he's been just a nightmare for the Vikings offensive line to deal with since he's been with Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And
C-Wise asked, does the Mack trade, Khalil Mack is going to the Chargers, does it affect Hicks? And my answer is exactly Drew's response. No. Chicago is blowing everything up. They are starting fresh. They are getting rid of all sorts of veterans. And
I don't think Hicks wants to be back in Chicago either, for whatever reason. He basically said all last year, yep, this is my last year. See you later. Thanks for the memories. I won't be a Bear again next in 2022. So I think he's moved on in his mind as well. And if that moving on ends up leading him to Minneapolis, I will not complain.
Joseph, if Bradbury has to practice against Hicks every day. He's going to have a nervous breakdown, I'm sure. We'll find out. And the other one is Corbett, the guard from L.A. they were targeting, is the other guy that we have a rumor of. We don't know. They can't act upon. We won't hear squat until Monday at noon officially when the legal tampering and they go, we've agreed to a contract, but they can't sign it until Wednesday at 4 o'clock at the earliest. So that's what we're doing.
That's another signing that I would be totally on board with. It makes sense. We've mentioned it a couple of times in this show that Corbett was a potential Vikings target because of the fact that he plays a position we really need a good player at right guard, and B, just as importantly, is he's got O'Connell knows all about him from the last 2 years being with the Rams and running the offense, and Corbett being the starting right guard there. And you talked about how Corbett could be almost a coach on the field for the Vikings offensive line and teaching them the offensive line system and how they're going to run things there. So there's a lot of things to like about Austin Corbett, along with his play on the field and what he could do for the Vikings offensive line off the field and getting them ready and acclimated to what O'Connell and the Vikings offensive staff want to do with the offensive line in 2022.
Andrew, there's been no personnel moves on the Vikings yet, except for signing T.Y. McGill.
But Pierce is certainly one of those guys that's considered likely to be somewhere else other than Minneapolis in the next month.
Yes. Now, let's move on to our next subject. Before we do, however, I want to bring up our partner, our beverage quencher, thirst quencher, Lake Monster Brewing.
We're not talking Gatorade either, Davey.
Nope. As you can see, Producer Dave's got a new hat, and I love it. And Producer Dave's also drinking latest sample. It's hard to see, but it says Lake Monster Brewing. This is one of their experimental mini growlers, whatever. It's 750 milliliters, and this is Empty Rowboat IPA, right? And sorry about there we go. It's only 6.9 ABV, but it's got an 80 IBU on it. And an 80 IBU means it has more of a bitter flavor, as in an English bitter ale, or what they were called that in England back in the day when I was there. It looks similar. It's got that coppery color. It tastes like it. Very, very good. It's a little dry on the palate, which I like. And you keep the pint glass in your left hand, and you have your darts in the right, and it is the perfect balance for a fantastic day, night, whenever you want to enjoy a great beer. And it's from our partners at Lake Monster Brewing.
Dave, when you're playing darts, did you get to shout out 180
Oh,
very
yes,
often?
I did. I was not bad. I was the only Yank on my pub's team, and we'd go pub to pub to pub to pub to pub and play. And I was one of the few Yanks that was decent enough to play, and I was the only one on my team. And I learned to play and get good because we played for pints, and that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Now, from there, we move into... You wanted to talk about things that happened at the Combine. In particular, Kevin O'Connell and what he was talking about there and how it may affect the Vikings.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about one thing. He had his media availability at the Combine last week, and he got asked, as I would expect any good reporter to ask a new head coach, who especially an offensive-minded one, what was his offensive philosophy going to be for the Vikings in 2022? And he said a few things which we'd heard about, but he talked about one thing that was a little thing that he mentioned, but something I thought was a big thing for the Vikings. And he talked about ways to attack the defense and using tempo as one of those tools to attack opposing defenses. And that got me, that really caught my ear because if you've watched, and everybody who's on watching this show right now are Vikings fans, so they've and a lot of all of them are probably all diehards. They watch probably every Vikings game they can possibly watch, so they know what a Mike Zimmer offense has looked like in the 8 years that he was with the Vikings. And a Mike Zimmer Vikings offense was very methodical and deliberate in the tempo that they used. They huddled up all the time. They let the go to the snap count, let it go to the 1 or 2 seconds. Then they'd hike the ball and away they go. And they do that over and over and over.
It was rare that they sped it up. Yes.
Rare that they sped it up. If you watch Sean McVay's Rams teams, and O'Connell was the offensive coordinator the last 2 years, you'll see that if they think that the offense is in a lull or they feel that they need a pick-me-up, they will increase the tempo on a dime at the snap of a finger with no warning. And I love that stuff. And I think that it's a great way to attack defenses. When I was coaching basketball, high school basketball, and not at a high level, but I hated facing teams who pressed you, who ran the fast break, who always put you on the defensive and made you feel panicked. And I think that when an offense goes up tempo and they're really good at it, they create a lot of mismatches. They create a lot of panic and require fast thinking that defenses are not ready for. It creates it prevents the defense from bringing in the personnel they need to combat what the offense is doing. I think it continues to create a lot of mismatches for the offense against the defense. And if the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell is going to use more up tempo, I think that I would like to see that happen a lot with the Vikings offense in 2022. One of the things that we've complained about a lot in recent years was the Vikings under Cousins, but it wasn't just then, it was other times too. But really, the 2-minute drill that we had run at the end of the first half when we had the opportunity often just fell flat. We looked very disorganized, head trouble. It looked like, moving and creating an up-tempo game and executing in that way. And the same thing late in the games too. I think one of the reasons that happened was because the Vikings didn't emphasize and didn't really practice the up-tempo and that type of aspect of the game enough. The Rams,
and we talk about them wasting time.
Yeah.
Why did it take him 23 seconds before he snapped the ball? Type thing.
Yep.
Yes, exactly.
So if you looked in the past, one thing that comes to mind is if folks on here remember the Buffalo Bills under Jim Kelly in the late 80s and the early 90s, they ran the K-gun offense, and that they used up tempo, like a 2-minute drill as their base offense a lot of the times. And we know they went to 4 Super Bowls, lost them all like the Vikings did, but they were basically one of the top 3 teams in the NFL during that era. And the K-gun offense was something that created a huge amount of trouble for opposing defenses that they faced. Didn't hurt that the Bills had pretty good offensive personnel: Andre Reed, Thurman Thomas, Kelly, and on it could go.
Oh, they were good. But when you make the Super Bowl 4 years in a row, you've got a good squad. Without a doubt.
You got a good squad. But I think that the K-gun, the up-tempo, and the mismatches it created even made their personnel even better than they were. And they took a look at their personnel and they saw that the up-tempo is what we have the personnel to run that. Is Kirk Cousins a K-gun kind of guy? I don't know, but I mean, Kelly is probably slower than Kirk Cousins was as far as mobility goes. I just think
I think Kelly had the clutch gene.
Yeah,
he had.
We're not going to get into the intangibles.
He had some of those intangibles and the big, set of cojones type stuff. When I made this image today, Yes, the Bills did have a badass offensive line, Drew. You got that right. When I made this image today, I had to think of Matthew Collar, friend of the show, friend of mine, who grew up being a diehard Bills fan, and he empathizes with Vikings fans, believe it or not. I know there's a bunch of people out there that can't stand him because of what he writes, but he empathizes with all the Vikings fans because he lived it too.
Yeah, I just I'm just hoping that we see that the I would really want to see O'Connell live up to those words at the combine presser and employ tempo. I'm not saying K gun like as the base offense, although I wouldn't be against that, but let's use tempo to get the defense off balance and on the defensive, and use that as one of the attacking tools for the Vikings offense in 2022. I think if they do that, we will be very happy with the results that will come out of that. And I think it will improve our 2-minute drill at the end of the first half and any late game type stuff that we have to do in the second half. And particularly if the Vikings are behind a couple of touchdowns midway through the third quarter or fourth quarter, like you were saying, Dave, even when that happened in the past under Zimmer, there would be no urgency from the Vikings offense to hurry up. They'd still be huddling up, taking the whole clock down to like the last 2 seconds. And you, as a fan, you're going, "What are you doing? We are behind. We need to hurry up and like we need to score quickly." And you guys are acting like we have a 2 touchdown lead and we want to milk the clock. So a lot of times it didn't make any sense to me, and I'm hoping that O'Connell and this talk about upping the tempo is going to be a regular thing that we see from the Vikings offense in 2022.
Mm-hmm. Paul, to answer your question, we don't know. We do know that the Vikings have inquired, however. So, should be interesting. That moves us on to our third topic, but before we get there, I want to remind folks coming the second day of the draft, and this is April 29th, it's ways off. The Climb in the Pocket crew will be live from Lake Monster Brewing. They'll be there set up, a bunch of great beverage, good food, great people. We'll have people popping in and out of that as we go live for the second round of the draft. It should be fun. Also with Lake Monster, like besides the great memories this brings back to me of darts in the mid 80s over in England, bouncing back and having a good time, throwing darts, getting well lubed up and chasing women. Hey, all those things that bring back wonderful, ideas, those could be yours at Lake Monster Brewing as well. So just join us. I just wanted to say a big thank you to Cousins. You do that, Stephen. And speaking of which, that moves us into our final section of the day. We're going on to position groups. And today's position groups are the quarterbacks.
Don't know why you got Sean Mannion up there.
Well, technically, he's still on the team until Wednesday.
Let's hope not. Let's hope that's as long as it lasts.
Those are your three quarterbacks that are currently under the roster. Sean Mannion comes off Wednesday, but you have Kirk Cousins and Kellen Mond, and that's it. That's all we got.
That's all we got. And yes, this is I saved the best almost for last, David, when going through the Vikings positional groups, and so the quarterback position is the second last one we're going to get to. Special teams will be the final one, but
and of course,
like you
we'll
said,
have fun with the kickers and punters on that one. So,
oh yeah, for sure. Like you said, it's the top priority of any NFL football team, and Vikings fans know the drill here, right? It's all about Kirk Cousins right now. We know we're in a tough spot with him. the 45 million cap hit, the fact that this is the last year of his deal, the fact that he reported, allegedly won't agree to an extension and that won't agree to a pay cut. And I'll say something about the pay cut is that it's not on Cousins to take a pay cut. None of us would really want to do that unless we had to. It's well within his rights to say, go pound sand, Vikings, even if as fans we'd like him to do something for the betterment of the team. But as we all know, teams will throw away players at the drop of a hat for their betterment. So not going to hold too much against Cousins for wanting to get as much money as he can, especially if that was a contract was signed to pay him that. But that's another argument for another day. But still, it's a tough position for the Vikings, and what are they going to do about it? And this week we've been seeing the rumors. You talked about some of them earlier, and a lot of stuff has happened on the QB market that is impacting the market for Cousins. There was the Rodgers extension, which maybe doesn't impact it all that much, but it set a bar for what quarterbacks are going to be making. I think you had the huge Russell Wilson trade to the Broncos, where the Broncos gave up a boatload of stuff, almost Herschel Walker like, as far as the package that the Broncos gave to Seattle to get Russell Wilson. And then you got the Carson Wentz trade, which was kind of the other side of the coin. I think that, there's, for Vikings fans, if you're trading Cousins, you want to get the deal that the Seahawks got for Russell Wilson. But the reality is you're probably now looking at, you're going to get something, the Wentz haul that the Commanders gave up to the Colts is probably more likely where I think that's closer to
cost
what we might
wise,
get.
where it's probably going to end up. Kirk is better than Wentz by far. So
he's also $17 million more expensive. And the
yes.
Colts had a better year last year than the Vikings did, even though Wentz did not have the same year as Cousins did. And teams are going to look at that. Ted Glover, one of our friends, and he and Drew do the Vikings Report, one of those shows that, along with this one, should be a must-watch for you if you're a Vikings
Comes
fan.
out on Saturdays, around noonish, somewhere in there. Yep. Is one of their
Ted nailed this. Ted nailed this when earlier in the week, when there was discussions about, okay, well, Cousins has got to be the top guy now that Wilson's gone, and how come we can't get 25 first rounders for him and all this stuff? But Ted mentioned was that, hey, now look at it. If you're another team, you got Cousins. He's only got 1 year left in his deal. It's $45 million. He's said if you're trading for him, you're not going to get him to take a pay cut. And you're going to have to, if you're giving up a lot, you've got to be confident that he's A, the guy, and B, that you can sign him for an extension at your price. And Cousins is
supposedly asking $45 million after the Rodgers deal. Cousins wants, from what I've been told, wants $45 million per. Now, this year, he's getting 35. Now, because part of that bonus is the $10 million that we add on to it because it got pushed out. Over his last contract, he made $33.3 million per year APR over the last 3 years, average, right? He wants $45 million on average for his next contract. That's a 26% pay raise. I would love a 26% pay raise, and I'm retired. So, from any real work, there is, I just can't see a 26% pay raise for a guy that is 500 and has only gotten to to the playoffs once. That blows my mind. But because of the market and the demand, and hopefully some not so wise coaches on other teams, they'll look at him and go, yes, I can fix it. I can use that. I can, excel. And by all means, go right ahead. Do it. Go for you. I wish you the best. Colts, if you go on and win a whole bunch of games, I'm happy for you. But please, second or third this year and the first next year, I'm cool with that. But we'll see. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, or if we're what my fear is. Dave's biggest fear is we're going to be stuck holding the bag. And I know Ted has talked to me about this offline. He's afraid we're going to be stuck with him for next year. We're going to pay out his contract. He's going to take the $45 million cap hit. He's going to get his $35 million. And at the end of the season, he's going to go, see ya, I'm going to go make $45 million someplace else. And we get nothing, basically nothing for him.
Yeah, that is the big fear. And if you, just to throw out some numbers about Cousins here, and here's his averages in the 4 years he's been with the Vikings. He's averaged 4,100 yards per season, 31 TDs, 9 interceptions, and a 68% completion percentage.
Right.
Now, Vikings fans who remember when we had Brad Johnson as the backup QB or the starting QB, Tavares Jackson, Christian Ponder, Teddy Bridgewater, those guys couldn't even throw for 3,000 yards in a year. If you told a Vikings fan that we were going to have a starting quarterback for 4 years who would average those numbers that I just rattled off for Cousins, they'd say, bro, we're going to the Super Bowl and winning it. And yet, after 4 years, like you said, you've got we've gone to one playoff game. We've had one playoff appearance in 4 years, and we won one playoff game. That's it with Cousins, and that is, in the end, that's the bottom line for the NFL. And again, yeah, are you paying $45 million for a 500 quarterback? I don't think so. But if you look at it from, I agree with you, Dave. The way things are going now, with the way the market has gone, unless something happens, I'm kind of getting the vibe that the Vikings are going to roll with Cousins this year and see how it works. And if you're looking at it from O'Connell's side of things, it sort of makes sense, because if in a way we don't like it, but he's probably looking at the Matt Stafford thing and he's saying, similar thing. They got Stafford last year. Here was a guy who had great numbers at Detroit, but there was always questions about whether he elevated the team. And boom, he gets traded to the Rams. Much different roster than Detroit, mind you, but he gets traded to the Rams. They win a Super Bowl. And I think O'Connell and maybe even Kwesi Adofo-Mensah think that if we can do what we did with Stafford with Kirk Cousins, I don't agree with that, but I think that's what they're thinking, especially when the reported asking price that for Cousins that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is looking for, like a couple of number ones, teams are not willing to match that. So again, if you don't want to give Kirk Cousins for 25 cents on the dollar, you got a guy who's got a strong baseline of play. You're expecting with a new coaching staff and a rejigged roster that things are going to be a bit different, and maybe the results are different than what they were the past 4 years. But I know what I want the Vikings to do. I don't think the Vikings are going to do what I want them to do. And that is I want the Vikings to me, Kirk Cousins is the third pillar of the Vikings temple of gloom. And I want that third pillar to be gone, but I'm afraid that the Vikings are not going to get rid of the third pillar.
Hey, I'm afraid you're correct. We got Andrew saying Joe Flacco won a Super Bowl. Yes, Andrew, Joe Flacco did. With a combination of a generational defense, and he got hot at the end of the season. Kirk Cousins tends not to get hot at the end of the season. He tends to get hot at the beginning of the season for Kirk-tember or Kirk-tober, and then his performances tail off.
Joseph, I agree, and I said that. The Rams team was built, and they added Stafford, who was a very nice addition to that. And then they added Von Miller this season and even helped it out even more. But that doesn't mean that Kevin O'Connell, if he's as confident in his abilities as he appears in public, that doesn't mean that Kevin O'Connell doesn't think that he can work magic with Kirk Cousins. And so sometimes coaches are their own worst enemies in what they think they can do with players. And they may feel that if they improve the offensive line, give Cousins the best protection he's ever had, and you still got Justin Jefferson and some other weapons that the offense can really hum and be a top 10, top 5 offense. and the defense won't be as bad as it was the past 2 years. And then you've got a much better team, like I say. And if Kirk Cousins gets super hot, like he was in September this year, and he's super hot at the end of the year, you can go on a run like you had with Flacco, or even this year with Stafford in the playoffs. But I don't think it's likely, but I can see how a coach would think that. And like you said, David, we're talking all about Cousins here, and he does dominate the quarterback position. But as I said earlier, the other part of this, once we get rid of Mannion, is the Vikings, this coaching staff has to really come up with a plan for Kellen Mond. We have to see what this young man can do. His rookie year was basically a waste, I think, both for Mond and for the Vikings. They did not learn jack shit about this guy, and they didn't develop him properly, and they need to do that, because if he's going to be the backup quarterback, we've got to be confident that he can handle that position in case Cousins, for the first time in his career, misses significant time. It happens to all quarterbacks at some point. Happened to Russell Wilson last year with the thumb injury. So you need a capable backup. The Vikings have not had that for the last 3-4 years, basically since Case Keenum, and they need a plan to develop Kellen Mond and see if he can be confident he can be the backup next year, so we have a good backup in case Cousins misses time, and also to see if he can be the eventual starter, maybe even in 2023, or at least find out that he isn't the starter, and then we come up with a plan to get the starter for 2023. And maybe that even means this year the Vikings, if you look, maybe we even look at drafting at 12 a quarterback. Say if Malik Willis is there, he's about the most intriguing guy to me, and I think you agree, David,
I agree
on that.
with
As
that,
far as
100%.
talent goes, that guy is off the charts with his athleticism. But if you're looking at the way the NFL draft order is going on right now, who needs a quarterback before the Vikings pick at number 12? Detroit, but I don't know if they'd pick a quarterback in. They're slated, I think, to go number 2 right now.
Right.
I don't know if they'd be want to pick a guy this
high.
group of QBs that high. And then Carolina, if they get Watson, they'll be off the table. Seattle, maybe if they get Watson, then they wouldn't be looking for a quarterback.
They're supposedly pushing for Watson as well.
So depending on, those are only the 3 teams I really see looking for a QB before the Vikings pick. And I don't really think that Detroit is going to pick a quarterback with this class that early. So I think really it's Carolina and Seattle you'd have to look at. And I think one of them probably is going to make a big charge for Watson and maybe get him, in which case you've only got one before the Vikings that really is looking for a quarterback. And maybe they like Pickett more than, or Matt Corral or somebody else more than Willis. In
Jonas
which case the Vikings
says possibly Atlanta as well. And welcome to the show, Jonas. I saw you earlier. For those that don't know, Jonas is part of the Climb in the Pocket team, and he hails and lives in Germany, part of our international crowd, just like all the Canadian fans, Australian fans, Brazilian fans that we've got to talk today.
Jonathan out there.
So,
but
we appreciate
the quarterback position, all about Kirk Cousins right now, and the development of Kellen Mond, really. We need a plan for Mond, and we need the plan on Cousins to get executed and quickly, because. But we're gonna find out what that plan is, in the next week.
Yeah, we have to. It's almost it's a must. So we shall see. Nobel War Prize talking about not drafting a pick in the first round. We'll see. If you looked at let me pull it up real quick, at the thumbnail for the show, I have on there, we have Tavares Jackson, right? I picked it for 2 reasons. One, the expression of, come on, sideline, Vikings, done anything yet? Where are we going? And the second one is, who was the last quarterback that we took in the second round in the draft? It's Tavares Jackson.
Yep. The what did Chili call him? The something of clay. He said he was like a something of clay. That Chili was going to mold him into like a premier starting quarterback. Mold
And he
all
had
those
some
tools.
skills. His arm was amazing. He could throw a ball. Yeah. Was it on target every time? Not necessarily, but he could throw a football. I watched him throw 75 yards, in the air. Boom. That's an artillery shell. And it's like, damn. But did he put it all together? No. Did he win us a playoff game? Yes. Out of all those people, Brad Johnson, Tavares Jackson, Ponder, Keenum, Teddy, they all won playoff games. Kirk's won a playoff game. 1 in 4 years. 1. So.
Let's stress that again. 1.
But, hey, T-Jack a good comp for Willis. It possibly is a building block. I think Willis is a little bit more advanced, but athletic-wise, I wouldn't see why not. How you could not do that. That's a good comp. Cunningham more Mon-like than Cousins. Hopefully Mond is relatively athletic. We'll find out. But we need somebody to groom him, somebody to develop him, and hopefully Kevin O'Connell and his new staff will do just that. At least we get to see who we have, what his skills and what he isn't. And I saw Troy Williams in there. Yes, we would have won that. Oh, I couldn't believe that throw and how it went through his hands. Oh, that just irritated me to no end. But yes, Troy Williamson, you can't teach speed. Like Ticey said.
Noel Moore also fumbled the ball at the goal line in that game on the first drive. It cost the Vikings 7 points as well. Let's not forget that.
Yep.
That was the game Peterson got suspended for the first series for we don't know. They started Noel Moore.
That's right. Be Young, I'm all for that. If that goes, I do love him as a football player. I question his deal as a human being, but I do know that people can be falsely accused. So, as a football player, heck yes, he would generate wins. And I'd be all for that because in all reality, that's what I care about. I don't need a team full of Boy Scouts. I want a winning football team. I want a Super Bowl win before I die. And as you can see, my beard is gray enough. So, that's what it is. Any last words there, Darren?
Looking forward to the next 5 till we get to Wednesday, David, to see what the Vikings do about their issues. Again, we said this last week on the show, but and I thought there'd be a bit more moving than just McGill returning to the Vikings, at least for now. But we thought we'd know I thought we'd know a bit more about what the Vikings roster was going to look like in 2022 and what the vision was for the Vikings with O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. We haven't found out much about that. I'm not sure, not from lacking trying on their end, but this week, pretty confident. And like you said, they have to get cap compliant, and they're certainly going to target some free agents. And we think we know what some of those are, like Corbett and a few others. And so going to be an exciting week for Viking fans. As I said, also you need to steel yourself that some players that you may really love and want the Vikings to keep may not be a Viking in about a week's time, much like what happened to Stephon Diggs a couple of years ago.
Less than a week, Wednesday.
Yeah. So just really waiting and anxious to see what Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has up his sleeve for shaping this Vikings roster for 2022. Because we've been talking so much about theoreticals, now we got to see some action and see some reality.
Supreme Train, that has been talked about. There's possible 3-way trade. I even heard it this morning. Cousins to Colts, Watson to us, and then something from the Colts to Texans. Some mixed up deal. We don't know. We won't know until it happens. And between now and then, and I've been glancing over at Twitter on my left shoulder, until that happens, Climbing the Pocket is watching Twitter. We've got people on the web 24/7. If something breaks, we're going to bring it to you. So, and we can discuss it, yay or nay, good or bad, whatever it is. We can discuss it. Hopefully, it happens sooner than later. Because if it happens later, it's going to be a whole bunch of stuff stuffed into Tuesday and Wednesday. But we'll go for it.
And you can discuss it over a Lake Monster Brew, David.
You got that right, buddy. Good memories. Brings back good memories. You can generate good, brand new memories. And far superior to just about anything I've had in a long time. So I want to thank Matthew Lang, who sent this to me, one of the owners of Lake Monster Brewing. Buddy, you rock. The beer rocks. It brings back my days stationed at RAF Fairford in England. I love it. Dude, keep it up. Keep up the great work. And until then, what do we say?
Great. Skull Vikings. Great optimism by King Kong there. We're the Vikings. Nothing will go right.
We may have been a fan for a while. Skull Vikings, everyone!
Right,
Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and rate us on your favorite aggregator. And a special shout-out goes to our partners, The Daily Norseman, where the best Vikings content can be found, and to Lake Monster Brewing, home of the best beer in Minnesota. Skol, everybody.